CrossCountry is a train operating company in the United Kingdom owned by Arriva UK Trains operating the new CrossCountry franchise. It operates the UK's longest direct rail service from Aberdeen in the northeast of Scotland to Penzance in Cornwall. It is one of only two franchised train operating companies that does not operate any stations. All routes call or terminate at Birmingham New Street. History. In June 2006, the Department for Transport announced its intention to restructure a number of franchises. Included was a new CrossCountry franchise that would incorporate the existing intercity CrossCountry franchise run by Virgin CrossCountry, less the West Coast Main Line services with the Birmingham to Scotland services transferring to Virgin West Coast and the Manchester to Scotland services transferring to First Trans Pennine Express. Some services from the Central Trains franchise were to be added. In October 2006, the Department for Transport issued the invitation to tender to the shortlisted bidders, Arriva, First, National Express and Virgin Rail Group. On July 10, 2007, the Department for Transport announced that Arriva had won the new CrossCountry franchise with the services operated by Virgin CrossCountry transferring to CrossCountry on November 11, 2007 along with the Cardiff to Nottingham and Birmingham to Stansted Airport services from Central Trains. Originally due to conclude on March 31, 2016, in March 2013 the Secretary of State for Transport announced the franchise would be extended until November 9, 2019. The long-term goal of establishing the CrossCountry franchise, since privatization in 1997, has been to create a franchise specifically responsible for long-distance and high-speed rail routes that bypass London, encouraging it to make quality service on these routes a priority. Routes. The company operates a number of key intercity routes outside London including the CrossCountry route from the northeast to the southwest. Core equals, the hourly service operates on each basic route. Extensions equals, there are extensions to the basic service pattern, to Penzance from Plymouth, to Glasgow Central, Dundee and Aberdeen from Edinburgh Waverley, to Cardiff Central, Paignton, Bath Spa, Exeter Street Davids and Plymouth from Bristol Temple Meads, to Guildford, Winchester, Southampton Central and Bournemouth from Reading. There are trains to Newquay and Paignton from Manchester Piccadilly, Dundee, Glasgow Central, Newcastle Central and Edinburgh Waverley on summer Saturdays and Sundays. However, the service from Piccadilly to Paignton operates several times a day throughout the year and not just on summer weekends. Some Manchester trains operate via Crewe in lieu of Stoke-on-Trent. Frequency equals. Typically, during weekday daytimes, each of these 8 routes sees one CrossCountry train per hour, with the exception of Birmingham to Leicester and Birmingham to Nottingham. These services combine to provide higher frequencies on the following sections: Birmingham to Bristol, half-hourly, Birmingham to Leicester, 2 trains per hour. Birmingham to Manchester, half-hourly, Birmingham to Newcastle, 2 trains per hour. Birmingham to Nottingham, half-hourly, Cardiff Central to Nottingham, hourly, Bristol to Cheltenham, half-hourly, Cheltenham to Birmingham, 3 trains per hour, Reading to Birmingham, half-hourly, Birmingham to Derby, 4 trains per hour, Derby to Sheffield, half-hourly per hour, Sheffield to York, half-hourly, York to Newcastle, half-hourly. Sunday service equals. Service on Sundays is slightly different from the normal core routes. The routes on Sundays are, Plymouth to Newcastle via Doncaster, Bristol to Manchester, Cardiff Central to Birmingham New Street, Birmingham New Street to Nottingham, Reading to Newcastle via Doncaster or Leeds, Birmingham New Street to Leicester Stansted Airport. Services transferred or withdrawn equals, after taking over the franchise, CrossCountry continued to operate the existing timetable including the West Coast Main Line services for 4 weeks. When the new timetable commenced on December 9, 2007, the Birmingham to Edinburgh and Glasgow services transferred to Virgin West Coast and the Manchester to Edinburgh and Glasgow services transferred to First Trans Pennine Express. The tender did not require retention of the services beyond Guildford after December 2008. So the services to Gatwick Airport and Brighton ceased. As a result, all CrossCountry services now completely avoid London. Additional services equals, From December 2008 a daily Nottingham to Bournemouth service was introduced. From December 2010 a number of services from Newcastle were extended from Reading to Southampton. From May 2011 a number of services were extended from Edinburgh to Glasgow to replace East Coast services. Special services CrossCountry extended some of its Bournemouth services to Weymouth for the sailing at the 2012 Olympics and Paralympics. There were 2 services Monday to Saturday in each direction, with 1 in each direction on Sundays. These ran express to Weymouth from Bournemouth. 1 train also operated a Weymouth to Bournemouth return journey, calling at Burham and Poole. Future services plans were included by CrossCountry to reopen a station at Kenilworth. In April 2008 it agreed with Warwickshire Council to draw up a business case. There is a proposal for a station at Worcester Parkway where the CrossCountry route intersects the Cotswold line. If built, it will be on 2 levels, with the low level served by CrossCountry, and the high level by First Great Western. Stations served only by CrossCountry CrossCountry does not manage any stations but the following stations are served only by CrossCountry but are managed by another train operating company. The high-level platforms at Tamworth are served only by CrossCountry, but are not considered a separate station from the low-level platforms. The whole station is therefore managed by the main operator of the low-level platforms, which is London Midland. Mania was only served by CrossCountry until 2013, when Greater Anglia started running 1 train every 2 hours at the station in addition to the CrossCountry services there. Other route information to try and create a more pleasurable travelling experience, CrossCountry has designated 4 stations as alternative changeover stations. Cheltenham Spa, Derby, Leamington Spa and Wolverhampton were selected. The aim here was to make connection times shorter, with the stations selected much smaller. For example, meaning that passengers travelling from Cardiff to Edinburgh could change at Cheltenham Spa instead of Birmingham New Street, reducing transfer times. At Cheltenham Spa both trains would arrive and depart from the same platform. This avoids having to change trains at Birmingham New Street, which is a larger, more complex station. These 4 stations are marked on the CrossCountry route map, in yellow. Performance. Latest performance figures released by NR for this period report a ppm of 89.2% and a moving annual average up to October 12, 2013 of 87.4%. Rolling stock. CrossCountry services are operated using diesel trains only, since none of the routes it operates is fully electrified. CrossCountry inherited 34 4-carriage Class 220 Voyagers and 45 carriage and 4 4-carriage Class 221 Super Voyagers from Virgin CrossCountry as well as 11 2-carriage and 18 3-carriage Class 170 Turbostars from Central Trains. In December 2007 Class 221 Super Voyagers 221,101-113 and 221,142-144 were transferred to Virgin West Coast with 221,114-118 following in December 2008. A franchise commitment was the acquisition of 10 Class 43 power cars and 40 Mark III carriages. Midland Main Line had 6 Class 43 power cars and 14 Mark III carriages that were off lease from November 2007 that were leased. The remaining 4 Class 43 power cars were ex-Virgin CrossCountry examples in varying states of decay. While the carriages were 5 ex-Virgin CrossCountry Mark III carriages and 21 ex-Virgin West Coast loco-hauled Mark IIIB carriages. Most had been in store at Long Marston for a few years. After driver training, the ex-Midland Main Line sets returned to service in May 2008 on Glasgow and Edinburgh to Plymouth diagrams, while the other Class 43 power cars were overhauled at Brush Traction, including repowering with MTU 16V 4000R41 engines, and the Mark III carriages overhauled at Wabtec, Doncaster to a similar specification as GNER's Mellard refurbishments. Once these were completed, the ex-Midland Main Line examples were also overhauled. To operate services to Paignton and Newquay on summer Saturdays, 2 high-speed trains were hired from National Express East Coast in 2008. High-speed trains were hired from East Coast and East Midlands trains on a number of occasions to operate services from Edinburgh Waverley to Plymouth when HSTs or Voyagers were unavailable. The Class 170 Turbostars were refurbished in 2008 with the 3-carriage units repainted at Marcroft Engineering, Stoke-on-Trent, the 2-carriage units at Hughes Toton Depot and the interiors done by Trans Projects, Clacton-on-Sea, including the fitting of first-class seating to the Class 175s and 176s. The tilt function on the Class 221 Super Voyagers was removed in 2008. It was no longer required as tilt was not required on the parts of West Coast Main Line that CrossCountry serve. CrossCountry says this change will improve the train's reliability and reduce maintenance costs. The Class 220 Voyagers and Class 221 Super Voyagers underwent refurbishment at Bombardier, Derby in 2008 September. This involved removing the shop, adding 25% extra luggage space and 14 extra standard class seats to the Class 220 Voyagers and 20% extra luggage space and 16 standard class seats to the Class 221 Super Voyagers. The interiors were given a refresh in 2011 December with the standard class seats recovered in the existing red and blue moquette and first class done with a maroon moquette. In summer 2014, CrossCountry began removing the quiet coach designation from such vehicles in its Voyager sets, believing them to be outdated and take up an excessive amount of space on a 4-car unit. It is retaining the quiet coaches on its 5 HST sets. See also, Arriva UK Trains, CrossCountry Route, Deutsche Bahn AG, Intercity Rail in the United Kingdom. References. External links, CrossCountry official website, Arriva corporate website, Central Trains remapping, briefing document.